Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you again for joining us today. Again, as always, I always ask everybody if you could please silence the cell phones, turn them off, put them on vibrate, something, just so we can avoid any interruptions. My name is Muhammad. I'm the executive director here at the Jerusalem Fund and Palestine Center. On behalf of everyone here, our staff and our board of directors, it's a pleasure to welcome you all here as always, and it's a pleasure to have everybody watching online as well, so thank you. It's also a great honor to introduce our speaker today, Benjamin Ladraa, who will be speaking about his experience of walking to Palestine. And Benjamin's here all the way from Sweden, so thank you for joining us. So in this presentation, Swedish activist Benjamin Ladraa will discuss what he witnessed of the harsh realities faced by Palestinian people living in the occupied territories as part of the Walk to Palestine project he embarked on in August of 2017, during which he crossed through 14 countries carrying the Palestinian flag. What began as an attempt to create a non-violent media event to shed light on the human rights violations experienced by Palestinians in the occupied territories, it acquired an additional layer of interesting encounters with border officials, police, embassy staff, migrants, and other individuals from Europe to the Middle East. His final destination was Jerusalem, which he attempted to reach 11 months later, but unsurprisingly, he was not allowed to enter from the Jordanian border. Just a little bit about Benjamin. He is a human rights activist from Gothenburg, Sweden. After working for the Red Cross, he embarked on the Walk to Palestine project, which was funded by personal savings and donations, in which he walked for 11 continuous months from Sweden through Europe to the Middle East. Benjamin will speak for 30 to 40 minutes, after which we will have a Q&A session. Again, please just, when we have the Q&A session, just wait for the mic to come to you before you ask so that everybody can hear. And for our online audience, you can always tweet your questions to us at Palestine Center. Without further ado, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Benjamin Ladraa. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you to all of you that are here today. I was surprised at the time to have an event at 12:30, so I'm very happy to see that so many of you showed up. I didn't think there would be anyone this early on a Wednesday. And you have to excuse me, I took the flight all night from Denver, 11 p.m. yesterday, and I just arrived this morning. So if my voice sounds a little drowsy, it's because I spent it sitting in an airplane stool the entire night. I will be talking about the journey I did from Sweden to Palestine through 13 countries, roughly 3,000 miles on foot. I finished this July, so it was quite recent. And a month after finishing, I came to the United States to embark on the next journey, which is this journey, the speaking tour. I've been to 18 states so far, and I'm going back home the day after tomorrow. So it's right at the end, then you're catching me at my second last talk that I do in this country. So I want to begin in Lebanon, where I was during my walk. I walked through 10 refugee camps when I was in Lebanon. You know that the Palestinian population are the biggest refugee population in the world. 12 million Palestinians exist on our planet, 7 million of them outside of Palestine, in refugee camps, in the diaspora. Through all the 13 countries I visited, I met Palestinians in every single one. And it's because of what happened 70 years ago. I'm sure you're very well aware of the history with the ethnic cleansing, the Nakba, between 47 and 48. Close to 1 million people driven out of their homes, close to 500 villages and cities razed to the ground, landmines planted in the ruins to prevent the refugees from returning. This camp is called the Baya Camp. It's one of the only Christian refugee camps in the world. Palestinians are, as you know, Muslims, Christians, Jewish, non-religious, other religions. There are people, so they are diverse. This is the same camp seen from the hilltop just beside it. And life as a refugee, it's extremely difficult, especially in Lebanon. They have very few rights. So the people in the camps were telling me between 70 and 80 jobs are forbidden from Palestinians from having. They cannot work as a doctor or as a lawyer, anything that requires higher education, governmental jobs, forbidden. They're not allowed to own property, so they're not allowed to expand the refugee camps either. And you can imagine, after 70 years and generations, new children, you need new houses because you're growing. But they haven't been allowed, so it's overcrowded. The infrastructure is terrible. They aren't allowed to build. You see these roofs, they're just corrugated steel sheets laid on the buildings because they're not allowed to have proper roofs, because that would be defined as a building, and they're not allowed to build new property. So that's a way to get around it, having these very poor roofs, which leak and which blow away in the harsh winds. I visited many refugee camps, 10 in Lebanon, a few in Jordan, and I was in Palestine before also, 2 years before. So I visited camps there as well. It's always like this, very narrow streets, infrastructure horrible, electrical wires everywhere, sometimes right along the water pipes, leading to incidents, especially for children. And overcrowded apartments, life is very difficult. And the one thing that everyone kept telling me, and if you've met many Palestinians in your life, you know this, that they just want to go back home. That's the one thing that every person in the camp kept telling me. If I could, I would go back right now. Leave everything. Right this moment, they would go back. But they aren't allowed to because of the military occupation. So I called my project Walk to Palestine. I know I'm not a very creative guy, so that's pretty much what I did. I took a flag. I put on a heavy backpack. I walked out from my apartment in Gothenburg and I started walking. So I didn't really know how to pack for a 1-year journey on the road. It's not like I've done anything like this before. And I'm not a hiker, I'm not a sports guy. I didn't really train or work out for this either. I just knew that if you have the mindset, if you have the will, you can probably make it. So I Googled, how do you pack for a 1-year journey? It just said, don't overpack. So I overpacked, of course. Around 25 kilos in this backpack. I know you don't use kilos, but it translates to very heavy. So very heavy backpack. And very soon the pain started coming to my shoulders and my back, my feet. And then someone writes to me on Facebook, like, why don't you get some wheels? Like, put your load on a wagon instead. So I get a baby stroller. And I put my backpack on the baby stroller. And I start pushing this thing 3,000 miles. So obviously they're not built for 25-kilo monster babies. They're built for city walking and not cross-country walking. So this is number 4 on the picture. The first 3 broke. First one broke in Germany, second one in Austria, third one in Turkey. And the last one lasted me until Lebanon, where I left it and did the last stretch with the backpack again. So it was quite a sight. People were maybe confused when they saw me push this thing around, like, who is this guy, what's he doing in the middle of nowhere on a big road, like going to what seems to be nowhere. This was the route that I took throughout Europe and some parts of the Middle East. 13 countries, and I know the Google Maps, it's in Swedish, but you're good with geography, so you know the countries anyway. I don't know why we renamed countries in different languages. I don't know where you got Sweden from either. We don't say Sweden, you know. In Sweden. We say Sverige in my country, in Swedish. That's the name for Sweden. I went to Germany, I went to the Czech Republic, to Slovakia, to Austria, to Slovenia and Croatia, to Serbia, Bulgaria. Only 1 day in Greece, so I count that. I was in Greece for 1 day. I was stopped by police 6 times during that day. So it was an eventful day. I woke up in Bulgaria. I crossed the border early in the morning. I walked through Greece. It's And I arrived in Turkey that night, was stopped by police 2 times in Turkey. So 8 police encounters in 1 day, 3 countries. So it was quite an eventful day. I also broke my record. I walked 55 kilometers that day. It's way too far. Never do that if you don't have to, because it took about 15 hours maybe. So that was tough. I walked roughly 8-9 hours a day, around 30 kilometers would be the average. That in miles, maybe 20 miles, a little bit more. And in Turkey I had a dilemma, of course, because you're good with geography, you know that Syria is in between Turkey and Palestine, so how do you go there? I was hoping for peace in the Middle East along the way. It didn't happen. So when I'm in Turkey, I call my Syrian friends in Sweden. In Sweden we have many immigrants, many refugees from all over the world, from Syria, from Palestine, from Afghanistan, from Bosnia during the genocide, from Chile during the Pinochet regime, from many countries. So I have some Syrian friends. I call them and I ask them, what's the least dangerous road through Syria? And they just laugh at me. Like, what are you talking about? I say, yeah, I know, I read the news, but I want to go through there. But they all strongly advise against it. You know, I'm a Swedish guy. My head might be worth some money if I was kidnapped. They make that point. I hadn't thought about that, so that was a good point. I go to Google again. I try to find a boat to somewhere. First, I thought of going to Egypt and going through the Sinai Desert and then taking a boat to southern Jordan, to Aqaba, and walking up to Amman and crossing the border from there. But there is no boat to Egypt from Turkey. There used to be one, but pretty much all the passenger boats along the Mediterranean Sea to the Middle Eastern countries have stopped going. Maybe because of the volatility in the Middle East, I'm not sure. But it was very difficult to find a boat, so the only one I find is one to Lebanon. So I end up going to Lebanon, to Tarablos. The boat journey takes 15 hours. That's the little sea stretch, because that's the only way to get close. And I arrive at the port, and there are some Lebanese soldiers waiting for me. I know they're waiting for me because they're screaming "Sweden, Sweden" when I get off the boat, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only Swedish guy on this boat from Turkey to Lebanon. I mean, I talked to some of the passengers; they were all the truck drivers, and they were just driving around with their wares. So I wave at the soldiers, saying, "I'm from Sweden. What's up?" They say, "Come with us." They have their military jeep. I say, "Why?" They say, "We're gonna take you to the immigration facility office." I say, all right. Well, I was going there anyway, and it was a 5-minute walk, so it was a 2-minute drive. They drove me for 2 minutes to there. And I went inside, and they started to ask some questions, the intelligence services. It took 7 hours of some questions. Like an interrogation. Where are you from? What are you doing? What are you going to visit? What's your father's name? Your grandfather's name? If you've gone to Palestine before, it was a bit similar. Not as bad, of course, but a little bit similar. And they kept asking if I was Jewish or not. I think that they thought I might be a Mossad agent or some Shin Bet guy. You know that they have had many assassinations in Lebanon. Israel has gone into Lebanon several times, assassinated a lot of people. And when the Mossad agents go there, they usually have double passports, so they don't go with their Israeli passport, of course. So even though I had a Swedish passport, they were suspicious. But after 7 hours of getting to know everything that there is to know about me, they would ask some questions, and then I had to wait for 2 hours while their headquarters in Beirut, I guess, did some research. The 7 hours, they said, "Welcome to Lebanon." I said, "Thank you." They gave me 3 weeks. So I walked to the border, and you're not allowed to go to the border without a permission. Southern Lebanon, you need permission to go there. And if you're Palestinian, you're not allowed at all. You can't go there. So I tried to get a permission. I'm visiting many refugee camps along the way. Of course, I speak to many Palestinians. And I managed through some connections to get a permission, but it's 2 weeks away, and I'm 1 day from the border, so it's very late. So I'm in the Rashidiyya refugee camp very close to the border, and I'm talking with the Palestinians there, and we come up with a plan. I'm with 4 people, 4 Palestinians, and they all work for the UNRWA, you know, the UN agency that takes care of Palestinians. So they have these big identity badges, ID badges, that says UN on them. And in southern Lebanon, there's a UN peacekeeping force, the UNIFIL. So we figure we take the last stretch with a car. We put their UN badges, very visible. On the rear mirror, we hang them, so you see UN badges everywhere. And when we come to the checkpoint, let's hope for the best. So it's me, a Swedish guy, 4 Palestinians, 5 people in the car. No one is allowed to go to the border, and we're driving. We come to the checkpoint and we stop. There's a soldier there. So we take down the window and he asks us who we are. And we just point to the UN badges. So he says, "Oh, you're UN." We're like, "Yeah," and smile. And he still asks to see the IDs. So we give him all the IDs. But of course, I don't have a UN badge. I give him my Swedish passport. And he asked me, like, "Who is this guy?" He asked them. He says, "He's our friend. He's with us." He says, "Oh, but he needs a permission. You know this." They say, "Yeah, we have a permission." The Palestinian guy driving is very smart. He says, "We have a permission. It's in the database. You can go check it." He says, "But you need it in paper. You know, that's the rule. You need it in paper form." He says, "Yeah, the printer was broken. We had some problems, some issues, but we have a permission. You know, we just had the printer issue." He says, "But you can go back and print it." He says, "No, it's a long drive. We're already here. It's just we're gonna be there 1 hour. We have permission. Don't worry." And we're with the UN. He says, "Well, it's not allowed, but I'll make an exception this time." And we look at each other like, "What, really?" And then he let us go. And so we're there, 5 people. None of us are allowed, but we managed somehow. I'm not sure how we did that. And we're looking over the border. There's a big hill, and you see the fence. It's just a fence, the border between Lebanon and historic Palestine. And one of the guys in the car, he's a little bit older than me, 35. And we're looking at his village. It's just on the other side, where his grandfather, or maybe it was his father, he was expelled from there in 1948. And it's so close. He lives in the Rashidiyya refugee camp. Driving maybe 1 hour, maybe maximum 2 hours, and he would be home. But the political distance is insurmountable at the moment. I mean, the physical distance is so close. He could just walk back there. If we would walk, we could be there the same day. And we're standing there and looking at it, and just the feeling of injustice, it's quite overwhelming. So close. So I can't cross the border there. Obviously, there's no border crossing between Lebanon and historic Palestine, Israel. So I go back to Beirut with a car. I take a flight to Amman, and from the airport, I walk to the border between Jordan and Palestine. I'll tell you what happened later. First, I want to tell you about when I visited Palestine. I was there around 2 years ago. Was the craziest journey I've done in my life. If you have been to Palestine, you know why. So I'm going to show you some pictures. This is in Hebron. Have you visited Hebron before? Anyone's been there? So you all know about the settlements, of course, the illegal settlements on the West Bank. What's peculiar about Hebron is that it has a settlement in the heart of the city. Downtown is occupied. Around 800 settlers are living there, surrounded by checkpoints and fences. Soldiers, around 2,000 soldiers, are there to protect them 24/7. So I could go inside the occupied city center, but my Palestinian friends could not because they're Palestinians. So me being a non-Palestinian in a Palestinian city, I can go inside the city center, but Palestinians inside a Palestinian city cannot go into the Palestinian city center. And these are my friends sitting and waiting outside. So of course I go inside to see. You see some graffiti, fight ghost town, because it's become like a ghost town now, and open the Shahadah Street. The Shahadah Street is the main market street inside of Hebron. It's pretty deserted now. It used to be the busiest street in town, where you go and do all your shopping. All these doors are shops where you went and bought your things, but now they've been forcefully closed by the Israeli army. They came and welded the doors shut, closing all the stores. And you see on the second floor, there are balconies and windows which have fences around them. So the Palestinians put up these fences to protect themselves against the settlers, because there's daily constant harassment. The settlers are throwing things inside the windows. So they had to put it up to protect themselves. And these doors are also the entrances to the houses. So now, if you want to go in and out of your house, you go up on the roof, and you do some acrobatics, and you use ladders to go down. But there is a very old woman living in one of these houses. She's old. She can't do acrobatics. So since they closed her front door several years ago, she hasn't been able to leave her house. Of course, she has friendly Palestinian neighbors that come with food and water every day. But imagine, when they came and welded the doors shut, she's been stuck ever since. I continue walking in Hebron. It's a surreal experience. This street, segregated. They put up a fence in the middle of the street separating Israelis and Palestinians. The big side for the Israelis, the side where you can drive. Of course, Palestinians aren't allowed to drive inside the occupied city center. The small side for the Palestinians. And if you travel inside Palestine, you will find many roads that are forbidden from Palestinians from driving on. They separate it, you know, green license plate for Palestinians, yellow one for Israelis. Even if you have the green one, if you're a second-class citizen, then there are many roads that are forbidden for you to drive on, even inside Palestine, inside your own country, because of the occupation. And I find this house continuing my tour. I'm only in the occupied city center for one day. It's an overwhelming day. This house had just been broken into a few weeks before I was there. The settlers came and took all the stuff, the furniture, the things inside the house. They put it in the parking lot. They pour gasoline over everything and they torch it. So the Palestinian family, they were out at the time and they come home. They find a broken front door, a pile of ash outside their house and an empty house. They're not living there anymore because imagine raising your children under daily settler harassment. When you send them to school, you're not sure if they're coming back unharmed or not, or if they're going to be assaulted by settlers or soldiers. So of course everyone haven't left. They're still holding on, very resilient people, but life is extremely tough. Tear gassed on their way to school. There are many videos that I was shown by the people in Hebron when they send their kids to school, and tear gas canisters on the playground and children running in panic and fear. And of course soldiers everywhere. That was the most common sight, soldiers walking around. And I put this sign here that they put up for good measure, so you have the Israeli explanation of why they closed the shops. The sign reads that these stores were closed by the IDF for security reasons after Arabs began the Oslo War. So Israel will always call the Palestinians Arabs, which is very misleading, because Arabs are from very many different countries, and they don't mean Jewish Arabs from Morocco. When they say Arabs, they mean Palestinians. And security reasons is always the reason, the justification for anything. The siege on Gaza, for example. Over a decade, nothing gets in, nothing gets out without Israeli permission for security reasons. But then, when you stop and think about it for more than 1 second, they forbade diapers at one point from entering Gaza, security reasons. They forbade chocolate from entering Gaza, security reasons, and potato chips. So this is very overwhelming to me. I knew about this situation before. I have some Palestinian friends in Sweden. They share their stories with me. I had done a lot of reading, human rights reports, books, watched many documentaries, so I thought I knew where I was going. But there is no substitute for reality. If you go there and see it for yourself, it's something else. You can read a million books if you like. If you haven't seen it, then that level of understanding hasn't sinking in yet. You can't watch the 10-meter high wall on a picture or on a video, but when you stand next to it, the reality of it sinks in so much more. So I go back. Here is where I live. Here is Sweden. This is Gothenburg. This is where I'm going the day after tomorrow, back home. And I'm very upset, emotionally overwhelmed. I'm not really sure what to do with myself. Am I supposed to go back to my old life after all of this? Just knowing this mountain of injustice existing for over 70 years and just go back to school and read some books and write some papers? Is that it? What do you do with the knowledge? I mean, knowing is not enough. Even if you're the most intelligent, bright, smartest person on earth, if you just sit at home watching TV, then you're not really changing much. And having all this knowledge now about Palestine, having bared witness to the suffering and the injustice under the occupation, I felt almost an obligation to do something, because I have I have some morals in my body, so I cannot see this and not get upset. But I'm not sure what to do, so I spend many days with that question every day, what to do. Of course, I continue on reading, because knowledge is power. And if there's one reading tip I want to leave you with today, it's this book called Our Harsh Logic by Breaking the Silence. Are you familiar with Breaking the Silences before? So for those of you who are not, it's a organization by Israeli soldiers where they speak out on what they are doing in Palestine. They break the silence on the crimes they are committing because, of course, they have a conscience. People are people, and when they do the things they do, imagine the conscience weighing down on them. That's why they go on spiritual journeys after their military service. They go to India, they go to Latin America trying to forget, but of course there's no forgetting if you killed children. So, just to give you a little sense, I'm just going to read a very short from testimony number 30 so you can get a sense of what these testimonies are like. And this book contains 300 of these testimonies, and this is just one book out of many. So the soldier is being interviewed, and he says that we were based at the regional brigade and we'll go into the city each time for ambushes. He's in Nablus. The interviewer asks him, when you say each time, what do you mean? He says, something like 4 or 5 times a week. Arrests, straw widows, and diversion tactics. The interviewer asks him, how many kills did your company have? He says, 11 armed, I think, and something like 4 or 5 kids. 4 or 5 kids? At some point they told us that since we'd only taken down 4 kids, they were giving our company missions because we were known for not hitting civilians. Who told you that? The company commander said it was the brigade commander. We were given certain jobs because we knew how to be selective and we didn't harm innocent people. And these were only 4 children? Only 4 children. And the 4 children were killed when? Between December and May. Small testimony, just one. 300 in this book. This is just one book that went through the military censorship of Israel, because all the media in Israel goes through the military censorship, including breaking the silence and their release. Just a few other headlines. How can you impose so many curfews and expect people to live? Or that they had a patrol to beat up Arabs, or that they go into the homes of innocent people every day, all the time. And when you go to Palestine and talk to people, you hear about this reality, how the children have nightmares because they never know when the soldiers are going to kick in the front door in the middle of the night and maybe arrest their father or their mother or their brother or themselves for that matter. You hear about the abuse, about how they get attacked on the streets. I heard too many stories to share from Palestinians. I'll share just a few with you. This is the family of Mohammed Abu Khader that I meet in Turkey. So Turkey is on the route, and I'm meeting them in Istanbul when I'm there. We're invited to a peace conference, and they're receiving this award that they're holding on the picture. And it's difficult to talk about. So Rachel Corey's family is just on the other side of this table. You don't see them in this picture, and this is the family of Mohammed Abu Khader. And we're sitting all, and we're talking. And their son was killed by settlers. He was 15 years old, on his way back home from school, when they assaulted him, beat him up, kidnapped him to the forest, and poured gasoline down his throat and lit him on fire, their 15-year-old son. And here they are, traveling the world, sharing their story, sharing the story of Palestine, so that people would know. Because we know that very few people know their story. It's not like it was on the news and the media. And you know the story of Rachel Corey, of course. She has amazing parents. I met them a few times now. First time in Turkey. Bravest young girl on earth, probably. Younger than me. Standing between a bulldozer and a house, trying to protect the house of a Palestinian doctor in Gaza. But the bulldozer did not stop. So, very overwhelming moment for me, sitting with these two families, talking about their children and their lives, and how their lives became after what happened to their children. I met many Palestinians. So in the refugee camps, this is Ahmed, in a refugee camp close to Irbid in Jordan. And he shares his story. It's very, very similar to other Palestinian stories. He's 8 years old in a village outside of Jaffa. The soldiers come, and you know what happens in 48. They surround the village with their guns, and they tell the villagers that if you don't pack up and leave, we will open fire, we will kill all of you. So he leaves with his family. They lock the door to their house, thinking that they might come back in a few days after the soldiers leave. They go to Nablus, where they stay for a few years until 1967, which of course you know your history. Israel invades the rest of Palestine and occupies it. So the soldiers are marching towards Nablus, and they're hearing rumors that they're killing everyone, so they have to flee again. He flees to the border between Palestine and Jordan in a refugee camp, where he stays a few months until the camp gets bombed by Israeli fighter jets. He flees again to another refugee camp, where I meet him 50 years later, still in that same camp, still on the run since he was 8. But now he's not 8 anymore, he's closer to 80. And he tells me that since he's an old man now, he has one wish left in life. He wants to die. But not on this land, not in a refugee camp. He wants to die in his house, on his land. He's holding the land deed which his father gave to him, proving that the land is his family's and the house is his. He's still holding the key to his front door. He's just waiting to go back, but because of the occupation he cannot. So you might have wondered why I did this walk in the first place, and having shared just a fraction of all the stories that I carry with me every single day, it's very difficult to know about injustice and not feeling some sort of duty, obligation, that you should do something about it. You can't know about injustice and keep quiet. You know, when good men and women do nothing, then things are allowed to thrive. So I wanted to do something, of course, but the question is always what to do. What can I do? I turned 26 3 days ago. My last birthday was in Austria. It was on the road. This time it was in Chicago during the American Muslims for Peace conference, where I was giving a few talks. I wanted to do something, but what can, before I started walking, I was 24. What can a 24-year-old guy from Sweden do? Like, I'm just a guy from Sweden. And this whole situation in Palestine is quite big. I mean, I can't change the world by myself. So what can you do, like, as an individual? You want to do something. We all want to do something when we see people suffer. So my reasoning was that one of the reasons that not many people are doing much is because they don't really know what's going on. You know that the education system here, they don't really teach the kids anything about Palestine, obviously, and not so much about other issues like it either. I doubt many young Americans know what's going on in Kashmir. The same in Sweden. If you ask young Swedish people to give you details about what's happening in Palestine or Western Sahara or other places, they don't really know. And if you don't really know, then of course you're not going to do much. You're not going to do anything if you don't really know. So awareness is key. It's really important that we know about the world, about what's going on, about reality, about the lives of the people living this reality every day for 70 years or 100 years, depending when you want to count. So how do you get people to know? How do you raise awareness? So I wanted to raise awareness. I thought this is where it starts. In order to have a mass movement to mount pressure to finally see human rights recognized on a bright sunny day, we first need the mass movement to spring out of something, and that requires awareness raising, that requires educating people on reality, on what's happening in Palestine. But how do you reach people? You can't really call the media as just a nobody and say, hi, I want to talk about Palestine. They won't have you. You can't go to the universities and say, like, I want to give a lecture to your students. They're going to ask you, like, what are your credentials? Are you an academic, scholar, professor? Like, who are you? And I'm just a guy from Sweden, right? So what can I do? So I decided, in order to gain some sort of platform, in order to gain people's attention, in order to raise some eyebrows so people would want to ask me why I'm walking, because the answer is within the question. When you ask me this question, you're opening up a space to talk about Palestine, and in this space, hopefully, we can raise some awareness. And not only individuals are asking, but the media might also be asking, I reasoned. If I walk to Palestine, I might get some interviews on some local media somewhere. They might thought it was interesting, so then I can share some stories about Palestine, so hopefully someone will read it. So this was the reasoning, and I think it worked. On social media, I reached millions. In the United States, I've been to 18 states so far, talked to over 1,000 people. So just doing something a bit not so normal and a bit extreme maybe, it's a good way to get attention, and then you just divert the attention to what really matters, and what matters is, of course, Palestine and the occupation, the human rights violations, and just the rights of the people. And it was very difficult to walk. This was my feet after a few days. I didn't train for walking. I don't know how you train for walking. I guess you walk. That's the training, right? So I started walking, and this was the result. Just a few days. Spent most of my nights in the tent. Sometimes I would wake up with some visitors in my shoes and inside the tent. I learned pretty fast that don't sleep in high grass, because that's where the bugs like to sleep as well. Sleep in short grass if you want to avoid visitors. I slept under bridges. This was in Germany. It was raining a lot, so this was at least a dry place. I slept in abandoned buildings. It's a building in Turkey that I went into. It took some courage to muster before going into this building, and luckily no one was there, so I spent the night. Most nights were in the tent. First time I set up a tent was in the tent shop in Sweden, where you buy tents. I asked the guy to teach me how to set up this tent. He teaches me. He sells me this tent, but it's not a good tent. You see the shape of the stick. In the middle of the night, I hear this loud crack, and I wake up, and I'm not really sure what to do. So I spend a few nights with a broken tent before I come to Dresden in southern Germany. I go to the tent shop and say, my tent stick broke, I need a new one. So I show them my stick, and they look a little bit confounded, say, like, where did you get this stick from? I say, I got it from Sweden. They say, oh, it's a Swedish stick. Say, yeah, would you give me a new one, please? They say, we have German sticks here. Okay, that's fine. I'm not a racist. I can take whatever nationality stick you got. So he says, but these Swedish sticks, or just, I don't know, he gives me this story that sticks from different countries have different lengths and the thickness, and we don't have your stick here. We can order it for you if you want. It will take a month. I don't have a month. So not sure what to do. I buy a much too big one, a longer one, because he didn't have one in my size. And I'm sleeping at some Palestinian friends, because I meet Palestinian everywhere. So they're in Dresden as well, staying the night there, and I asked them, like, I need a saw to saw off this stick to make it the right size. So they find a saw for me, and we fix that. After a few nights, or a few weeks, it breaks again. And it's really bothering, because you have to sew it back together. It becomes a mess after a while. After 3-4 times when it breaks, it's just a mess. It's not repairable anymore. At this time, I'm in Austria, and I have this very interesting meeting with a gentleman around 55 maybe. He shows me pictures of himself before, and he seemed very old and stressed on his pictures, wrinkly, dark under his eyes. But when I'm talking to him, he's full of vigor and energy, very smooth skin. All his wrinkles had disappeared. And he tells me his story that he had a very stressful life before, working 15 hours a day, like for no reason really, earning tons of money, not happy, not knowing what to do with it. So he decides to quit everything and start walking. And he walks to Oman from Austria. Oman is beneath Saudi Arabia. It's a very, very long way. And he plans the walk every day, how far he's gonna go. I didn't do this. I did it after a while, but I'm really impressed by how he did it. He told me that he made a schedule knowing every day where he was gonna end up. So when he's in Iran and in the capital Tehran, he arrives in Tehran on the day that he anticipated from Austria. He tells me that I can schedule a meeting in Beijing, maybe, in China. I'll be there in 2 years. I'll be there on time. I'll walk there. Incredible man. And he happens to have a bunch of good tents lying around. He gives me a very good tent. That's how I get my new tent replaced. And now he's walking from Norway to South Africa. Not many people know who he is. Very few, actually. He has like 100 followers on Instagram. But he doesn't do it for any reason other than it's a good way to live life. And it's very I guess, spiritual, satisfactory. So I have many interesting meetings, of course. He's smart. He doesn't use a baby stroller. He knows that these guys, they break, the wheels fall off. He uses something more robust. He's in Germany at the moment. He's about to cross the border to the Czech Republic, just like I did. So I walked for pretty much a year. So of course I experienced every season, the winter, the summer. The summer was tougher than the winter. Southern Turkey with the mountains, lots of ups and downs, and very, very hot. I didn't know what to do with myself. I was sweating a lot, and it was really much tougher than sleeping in the snow, although the snow was tough as well. I mean, I'm from Sweden. It's not like I'm not used to snow, but when it's snowing a lot, and when it's cold in Sweden, then we go inside, we make a nice cup of tea, and we wait for summer. We don't stay outside. We don't go 10 hours in a blizzard. So that was a new experience. And then this night in Bulgaria, when I cross the border to Bulgaria, I get arrested. The police come and they say they want to ask me some questions, like they always do. So I say, fine, ask away. They say, no, we want to ask you at the station. I'm like, why? You can ask anything you like right here. They say, no, we want to ask you at the station. I say, are you arresting me? They say, no, we're just going to ask you some questions. I say, okay, ask away. No, at the station. So you're arresting me? No, we're not. We're just going to take you in the car and drive you away to the station. I say, do I have a choice? Can I walk away right now? They say, no. So they arrested me and interrogated me for about an hour before they let me go. And this night in Bulgaria, they show up again, although I don't know it's the police. I just hear a lot of voices and footsteps in the night. So naturally I get very nervous and I try to think of something to do. I don't really have a plan for when people come in the middle of the night to my tent. I thought about it on the way, but I never had a good plan of what to do. Like, what do you do? So they come, I open the tent, I say hello. They ask me, what are you doing? I realize it's the police, but I can't believe that the police is in the middle of the night in the forest, so I ask them back, what are you doing? They say, what are you doing? They didn't answer. So I say, I'm trying to sleep. It went pretty well until you came. And then they say, where are you going? I say, I'm going to Palestine. And I know it's a difficult story to sell to them. I know they won't believe me, but what can I say? I only have the truth. So I say, I'm going to Palestine. They don't understand. They say, what? Where? To Palestine. To Pakistan? No, Palestine. Where is that? It's in the Middle East. But we're in Bulgaria. You know where you are? I say, yeah. I'm in the forest in Bulgaria. I know exactly where I am. They say, why are you here? I say, I'm going to Palestine. Yeah, but why are you here? I say, I'm passing through. Where are you from? I'm from Sweden. Like, they don't believe it. They think I'm a Palestinian guy going to Sweden to seek asylum. So they ask me for my passport. I give them my passport, and they start laughing, like, you really are from Sweden? I say, yeah, I'm not lying. I'm not kidding you. And they let me go. They always let me go after I show my passport. I didn't have to apply for a single visa during this entire journey. We live in a world with a very unfair system. If you're born in Palestine, you're giving a Palestinian passport, you can't travel. You're stuck. If you're born in Sweden like me, you can go anywhere you like without any questions asked. Sometimes one or two questions, but nothing difficult. I mean, imagine the scale of that unfairness. What is this? It doesn't say anything about me where I'm born. It doesn't say anything about you if you're born in Palestine or Iraq or Russia or Sweden or South Africa. What does that tell you about you? Nothing. But still, governments allow you entry or not, just based on that. So that was a feeling of privilege, being able to travel like this without any hustle, being stopped by police almost every day. Really, the police came all the time. The first time in Sweden, I thought it was funny. Second time, it's not so funny. They just come all the time. But they go after I show them my passport. And I didn't meet refugees on the road. I met one guy on the border, German-Czech Republic. And it's because the police show up all the time. If you're a refugee and you're trying to go somewhere, and in Europe we have something called the Dublin Law, where if you're a refugee applying for asylum and you get caught by the police, they force you to take your fingerprint, and in whatever country you do that, that's where you have to apply for asylum. It doesn't really make sense, since most people are entering through Greece and Italy. So if you want to go to Sweden and apply for asylum, for example, I mean, the police will catch you if you walk on the roads. Like, they came every day to me. I can't imagine walking for days and weeks trying to avoid them. It would be extremely difficult. Avoid all roads, only go at night in the middle of the forest. Don't buy things at the supermarkets because people might suspect you and call the police. I mean, I know that people called the police on me because they showed up so much. They could possibly not have known that I was at the particular place where I was at if someone didn't call them and say there's a suspicious man walking in the middle of the road with a big flag. So I know that lots of people called the police when I was walking. So it's very difficult for refugees. And that's why I didn't meet any, because they're not out during the day, of course. Let's take some questions after. So I'm in Turkey. The police show up. They wanna know what flag it is. I mean, this is the military police, the blue one, the normal police, the white one. The secret police, the other car that you don't really see. We're surrounded by 20 police at this point. Lots of police on this trip. Do you know who this girl is? So for those of you who don't know, Ahed Tamimi. I will tell you. Her name is Ahed Tamimi. You see her in handcuffs. She's 16 years old. She became very famous, but not everyone knows the full context. So we'll just place her in the context of being raised in the village of Nabi Saleh, a few hundred people living in this village in Palestine. They have a natural spring close to the village where they go and get their water. And then Israel decides to build an illegal settlement close to this village. And the settlers go to this spring and say that this spring is a Jewish spring, always was. So no Palestinians allowed. So the Palestinians, of course, say you can't just come and steal our water, but the settlers had the military there and they chased them away. So the Palestinians start doing demonstrations. They've been demonstrating every Friday for over a decade against this theft of water, land occupation and everything. And she's raised in this village, so she's born and raised doing demonstrations all the time. Her house has been raided by the soldiers over 100 times, not exaggerating. Her father has been arrested and tortured multiple times. Her mother has been shot, I think twice, also arrested multiple times. And they shoot her cousin in the head with a rubber bullet. And 1 hour after, the soldiers are back on her porch and she gives one of them a slap. That's the story of Ahed Tamimi, and I thought I'd show you that slap so you can see it if you haven't seen it already. And an Israeli politician's commentary on BBC, what he thought about the slap that she did.
My name is Oren Khazan. I'm the youngest member of the Knesset, actually member of the Israeli parliament.
When you saw that video of her slapping the soldier, what went through your mind?
If I was there, she would finish in the hospital, for sure. Nobody could stop me. I would kick her face. If you will act with terror, we have the right to go inside your houses and terminate terror.
A slap isn't terrorism.
No, a slap is terrorism, believe me. A slap is a terrorism.
So it's a little bit unbelievable that members of parliament would say things like this. But this is reality. Yeah, in Palestine as well. So what happens is that, as it always happens, the Israeli army comes in the middle of the night to her house, as they have done over 100 times before. They arrest her, they throw her in the military jeep and drive her away to Israel. And then the interrogation starts, hours on end, every day. And there was a video leaked from the interrogation, and 90% plus of children being interrogated by Israeli soldiers report torture. They report sleep deprivation, abuse, both physical and verbal, threats. And in this video, it illustrates some of that. They're showing her a video on their laptop from one of the demonstrations where all her friends and family are. So the entire village is demonstrating every Friday. So everyone she knows is in the demonstrations. They're showing her a video, naming several names of her friends and relatives, threatening her if she doesn't cooperate. And this went on for hours every day. Palestinians live under a different legal system than Israelis. They live under martial law, military law. So they go to the Israeli military courts, which have a conviction rate of over 99%. 99.74 last time I checked. And during these interrogations, they interrogate children and send children to jail as young as 12. They want them to cooperate by signing a confession usually in Hebrew, a language they don't speak. So they threaten to arrest their family, take their friends. If they don't sign this piece of paper, which they don't know what it says, children as young as 12, a confession which then is used as evidence in these military courts to send them off to prison. She's just one girl. She gets sentenced to 8 months for that slap. Her mother as well gets 8 months. Why? Because she filmed the slap. That was her crime, so off to prison with her. She gets out, she wants to travel, she wants to speak about what's going on in Palestine. Because she's smart, she knows that narrative matters and that very few people hear what's going on in Palestine and Israel. And the politicians are also smart people. They know that narrative matters, so they forbid her from traveling. First thing that happens when she gets out, she gets a travel ban. She can't go anywhere. Because they know. If the people of the world knew, if they hear from children living under occupation, being imprisoned for a slap, having their family tortured and killed for their entire lives, if they allow them to speak to the world, then the world they might know. She's just one person though, one child. Every year, hundreds of children are processed through the Israeli military system. In July, there were 270 kids imprisoned. But every year, 500 to 700, sometimes more, gets arrested. Sometimes Israel doesn't even bother to go through their so-called legal system with military courts. Administrative detention is the practice of arresting someone, throwing them into prison without a charge, secret evidence, no court, indefinite time period. Completely illegal under international law. Very common practice amongst the Israeli military, throwing Palestinians into prison. Also statistics from July, over 400 people. Speaking of justice, I thought it would be good to show you the Israeli Minister of Justice, the woman that thought that 10 years in prison for throwing a stone is not enough. She raised the punishment to 20 years in jail for throwing a stone. And the two quotes I'm sharing are two quotes from her Facebook, that she shared on her Facebook. First one saying that this is a war between two people who are the enemy, the Palestinian people. Second quote that she shared on her Facebook, the Minister of Justice. She said that they are all enemy combatants. She's talking about Palestinians. Now this also includes the mothers of the martyrs who send them to hell with flowers and kisses. They should follow their sons. Nothing would be more just. They should go, as should the physical homes in which they raised the snakes. Otherwise, more little snakes will be raised there. She's calling for the death of Palestinian mothers and the destruction of their homes so that they cannot have any more children, which she calls little snakes. This is the current Minister of Justice. And I want to juxtapose on the topic of justice. Ahed Tamimi's got 8 months in prison for a slap, a 16-year-old Palestinian girl. This man, Elor Azaria, he got 9 months in prison. He's an Israeli soldier. He was wearing his military uniform, having his gun, He walked up to a Palestinian man lying wounded on the ground, face down. He put his gun against his head and pulled the trigger, and he didn't know he was being filmed, but he was. So he was filmed carrying out an execution. So Israel pressed charges against him. And when it did, the people went out into the streets of Tel Aviv in the thousands, protesting. You would imagine that they would protest maybe the conduct of their soldier, the behavior, but they protested the charges itself. They protested that Israel was even having a case against him. He did nothing wrong, right? He just killed a Palestinian. He gets 9 months in prison for an execution, and Ahed gets 8 months for a slap. And I haven't even mentioned Gaza, of course, which is always so difficult to talk about because the magnitude of the destruction and the human suffering is not suitable for any language to describe. 3 invasions in a decade, 3 wars, the most crowded, densely populated areas on Earth, one of them. 2 million people, half of them children, 1 million children being bombed by thousands of tons of bombs, 3 times in a decade. White phosphorus, like napalm, 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, dropped on a UN school, serving as a refugee shelter. They called Israel 17 times, giving Israel their coordinates, saying that we are a UN school, don't bomb us, we have refugees, we are sheltering refugees, we're a UN school, don't bomb us, 17 times. And they dropped white phosphorus, burning people alive. I could show you pictures of the children and the babies, their corpses that have been incinerated. I won't, because they will give you nightmares. They give me nightmares, but they're on there if you want to see them. You can Google Gaza. Israel's Minister of Defense, former, he resigned recently because of a ceasefire with Hamas. He wanted to bomb Gaza more. He said this in an interview, that there are no innocents in Gaza. 1 million children under the age of 18. So the people are protesting. These are the biggest demonstrations in the world at the moment. Thousands of people every single Friday since March 30th. They're protesting because they have no water. 97% of the water is polluted. It's unfit for human consumption, according to the World Health Organization. Why? Because Israel destroyed the water cleaning facilities and the sewage system. They don't have electricity, so they're protesting. Why don't they have electricity? Because Israel bombed the power plants. They have around 4 hours a day of electricity. It could come on in the middle of the night. It's unlivable. They don't have jobs. Unemployment is through the roof. Why is there no economy in Gaza? Because they're under a military blockade and a siege, which doesn't allow anything to come in or out. Israel doesn't allow cement to go in, but when you drop thousands of bombs, thousands of tons of bombs on residential areas, on hospitals, on schools, on flour mills and power plants, on the infrastructure, when you smash it to pieces and bits, it needs to be rebuilt. It cannot be rebuilt without rebuilding materials, which Israel is forbidding from entering. So people are demonstrating also because they are refugees. 70% of the people in Gaza are refugees from what happened 70 years ago, from the catastrophe, and they want to go back home. And as we know, Israel responds with terrible violence to any sort of resistance, to any demonstration, to any flag waving, to any slogan, to any child. Very violent. Shooting everyone close to the border, which is no border. It's an armistice line. It's just a fence. Israel never declared its borders. Shooting journalists, shooting disabled people, all in the name of self-defense, all in the name of security reasons, shooting people without legs, shooting medical personnel, Razan al-Najjar, 21 years old, giving first aid to a wounded demonstrator close to the fence in her white lab coat, giving first aid, and then a sniper decides to kill her. But in the media you will read violent riot. You will read self-defense. And they take pride. This is not accidental. This is not unthought of. This is very intentional. The IDF, the Israeli army, tweeted that they knew where every bullet landed after they killed 60 plus people the day that the Jerusalem embassy, the American embassy, was moved to Jerusalem. They tweeted they knew where every bullet landed, and we saw pictures of dead children, and that raises questions. They take pride that they're snipers. They ask first their commander if they can take the shot or not when they peer through the scope looking at a person that they want to shoot. The commander says yes, and then they take the shot. So when we see dead children and dead journalists, dead medical personnel, ambulances with bullet holes, we know it's not by accident, because they say that they know where the bullets land. They say that nothing is carried out uncontrolled. I met some of the people that got shot. I was in the hospital in Jordan, in Amman, and Jordan and Israel has an agreement that some people can get treatment in Jordan, but to get that permission from Israel is extremely difficult. 20,000 people plus have been injured since March 30th. And I'm at the hospital. There's about 8 people there. And you know that the hospitals in Gaza have been bombed. They're undersupplied, they're underfunded, they go on generators. It's terrible. The need is immense. But only a few people, a handful of people at the hospital. And I'm talking to them. And the man in the wheelchair, he was at close to the fence for 5 minutes, a few hundred meters away. He's at the demonstrations for the first time, because it took a lot of courage for him to go there. It's very difficult to go and demonstrate for your human rights and for your dignity if you know that you will be met with sniper fire. Very few people can muster that courage. If we would go out today and demonstrate for human rights, if we knew that there were snipers there to shoot us, we might be hesitant to do so. So several Fridays he hesitated, but one Friday he decided. He mustered the courage, he went. 5 minutes, and they shot him in the leg. And he's telling me, or maybe he's telling himself, he's asking, was it worth it? Does anyone care about us? We get shot and killed every day. We have no life here. We just want to live. Who cares about us? He's asking me, do people care? Has the world forgotten that we exist? Does the world not see? I see the cameras. There are pictures and videos everywhere, he says, but why doesn't anyone care? Where is the outrage? They get shot and killed every day. Where's the outrage? Why doesn't people react to this? What can I tell him? I'm sitting with him. Should I tell him that Shakira decided not to go to Tel Aviv to do a concert? They need solidarity. They need our help. They need us to put pressure on our governments, and you happen to be in the most important place on earth to do so, to make a change, because this is what they're facing every day when they go to do a demonstration demanding their human rights. They face sniper fire, and they're using explosive bullets, dum-dum bullets, which the British used during colonial Africa until they stopped using that because they thought it was too cruel on the natives, using bullets that goes into your body and exploding. That's what Israel is using against the people in Gaza every Friday. The Minister of Education was interviewed if he would instruct the army to shoot and kill Palestinian children who breach the border fence, and he said that they are not children, they're terrorists. It's the Minister of Education. But now he wants to be the Minister of Defense, Minister of War, Minister of Occupation. Of course the world knows what's going on. We're not blind. The UN is not blind, it knows what's happening. Countless UN resolutions, 70 plus, deploring the denying of the human rights of Palestinians, deploring the deportation of Palestinians, deploring the killing of Palestinian students, deploring, but the UN cannot act if the US vetoes every single Security Council resolution, which it does. The latest resolution vetoed was the one in Gaza. Kuwait drafted a resolution condemning the use of excessive force against unarmed demonstrators in Gaza. We might ask ourselves what right Israel has to use any force at all against unarmed demonstrators demanding their human rights. This resolution just said excessive force. The US thought that was too much and vetoed it, saying that it's okay to use excessive force. Netanyahu is the leader of the Likud party, which has in their charter that they flatly reject any Palestinian state. So if you're Palestinian, you might ask yourself, what do they want from me? They don't want me to have my own state. Do they want me to be a part of their state, of Israel? No. He also said that I don't want them either as citizens of Israel or subjects of Israel. Not offering much. But if we were to wait for politicians to save the world for us, we would have to wait a long time. Obama signed a memorandum of understanding giving Israel $10 million every single day to their military. And as a Swedish person, if I would ask my citizens, my fellow Swedes, if they thought that they would like their tax money, our tax money, to go to a foreign country's military, to Russia's military or Iran's military or the US military, people would just look at me as if I was crazy. And I think most Americans are the same. Like, you don't want, I think, your tax money to go to another country's military when you have homeless people in the streets, student debt, lack of health care for a lot of people. I've been to 18 states now. I've seen so much poverty and despair in a lot of people. I met many people who are really struggling and could use those $10 million a day to something else. So I choose to do this walk, not because I'm hopeless, not because I see what's happening in Palestine and other places and despair, but because I see it and feel that it needs to change, and I know a little bit about how change happens. At least I have some thoughts on it. Change happens when we mount pressure, when we make a demand. You know that power never concedes without a demand. But just a demand, I'm demanding right now human rights for everyone. I don't have any pressure to back it up. 1 million people at home watching TV, angry at the injustice in Palestine, angry at injustice anywhere, it's not changing anything. 1 million people out in the streets demanding justice and freedom and human rights is changing a lot. We know from history how humankind have taken progressive steps forward. This is the Women's March 100 years ago when the suffragette movement demanded the right to vote for women. It didn't happen by itself. It happened by people out in the streets putting pressure, making a demand, because rights are not given. Rights are won. You know this from the history of your own country, the civil rights movement. And if you think that you don't have much power as individuals, I know I feel that as well sometimes. It gets overwhelming and you get into despair and depression when you see children burning. But we need to always remind ourselves that we do have more power than we realize. And we never know the results of our actions, what they're going to be in the long run. Of course, we don't change the world with just one action. Activism is not about doing one action, one demonstration, one fundraising event, one whatever, and then saying, okay, I did my part. It's about being in it for the long run. You know that Martin Luther King said that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And Joshua Wong, this 15-year-old kid in Hong Kong, proves to us that things can happen, even though it seems unlikely. He's 15 years old. He's at his school, and China wants to change the curriculum of Hong Kong against the wish of the people. He doesn't like it, so he gets together some friends, and they start making some demonstrations, these teenagers. Of course, China doesn't listen to a couple of teenagers in the street. They decide that they want to have the governor on their side. They want to have the politicians. So they try to go to the governor to talk to him, to get him to also demand that China doesn't do this. The governor doesn't care about a few kids. They call him, he doesn't answer. They send emails, no answer. So what do? They organize an occupation in front of the governor's building. A few kids, they set up some tents, and they stay there demanding a conversation to ask him to stop what China is doing. The days go on, the media go there because it's an interesting story. These kids are out there in the rain, And people are starting to talk about this, like these kids making this occupation and the governor not talking to them. And now the governor doesn't look very good because he has these kids and their tents outside his office. And people are talking about how he's not talking to his own citizens. He has to save his face. So he calls a press conference. He invites the children to save his face. He listens to them, says, yes, I understand your concerns. I will think about it. I'm also concerned. He says, but we know politicians. He doesn't care. The kids go home. Of course, nothing happens. Joshua, their leader, he doesn't give up. He decides that he needs to step up the pressure. It didn't work with the governor. Let's get more people. So he organizes another occupation with a few more organizations. Once again, they're out in the streets. This time they're occupying the highway. And it's as Gandhi said, that people don't need to be taught about the injustices plaguing themselves. No one needs to come to you and talk about to you about America and the injustice that exists in this country. You are well aware of that. And the people in Hong Kong already felt what he felt. But when they saw this kid leading the struggle that they already sympathized with, maybe they felt guilty. They started to join him. They couldn't sit back at home anymore watching the kid doing all of this while they did nothing. Even though they were aware, even though they were intelligent and smart people knowing what was about to happen and that they didn't like it, but they were passive. But when they saw him being active, and this was Gandhi's point, people don't need to be taught about injustice, they need to be activated to do something about it. Knowledge is not enough. So they started to join him. And all of a sudden, they weren't a few kids anymore. There were 100 people. Then there were 1,000 people. And in this picture, there are over 100,000 people in the streets. And 100,000 people watching TV is nothing. 100,000 people in the streets is everything. And when China sees this, this is the pressure, so it backs off. And it started with him. It started with a 15-year-old taking initiative, being active, knowing about the injustice, but also doing something about it. It's the same with Palestine. It starts with awareness, it starts with education. That's why I chose to walk. That's why I choose to talk also, to try and raise the awareness. I not only walked there in every capital that I went to, I organized lectures at the universities. I called the media to try and talk about it. I've spoken to thousands of people trying to raise awareness about Palestine, but there are millions that needs to be spoken to. And obviously, not one single person can free Palestine, free the world, change the world, stop climate change, stop sexism, stop racism, and do all that needs to be done. But we together, when we start collectively working, when we start collectively taking action, knowledge is not enough. We all know that human rights abuses are wrong, that the occupation brings with it terrible violence. But when we decide to also do something about it, then we create the future that we want to see for the kids in the refugee camps, for the old people waiting to go home, and for every Palestinian and Israeli that just wants to live in peace, without violence, without occupation, without war, that just wants to live a decent, prosperous life without all these terrible atrocities happening, and wants a stable future for them and themselves. It's up to us if we're to do something or not. And I invite you all to do as much as you can, because we can all do something. It's not about walking to Palestine. It's about looking at yourself, asking yourself, what can I do? And what's the next step for me in being an active part in trying to create the world we want to see? Thank you.
Benjamin, thank you so much for a great presentation. Thanks for sharing your experiences with us. We have time for some questions. Anybody like to start?
Benjamin, a very, very, very powerful, well-made presentation. You seem to be mostly talking about Palestinians in occupied lands. Did you get any impression of the Palestinians living in Israel who have rights to vote and so on and so forth? How were they reacting to all these conditions which they must know about?
Yes, there are over 60 discriminatory laws against Palestinians in general, and Palestinians in Israel also face tons of discrimination, and they also have a very real struggle against the occupation, against discrimination. So the struggle is for everyone.
Thank you for your most interesting and illuminating talk. What brings me down is that Israel wouldn't exist without Americans' money. I've heard that, you know. There is so much money going from America to Israel, and it's overwhelming. My second question is, are there enough Palestinians in Washington, D.C.? I'm British. I was born in Egypt, so I'm to have this march on, you know, to do this 100. Are there enough people from the Middle East to demonstrate what we saw in China? You know, that kind of.
I believe that there are plenty enough people anywhere and everywhere to stand for human rights. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't have to be Palestinians. When we see injustice, it's a universal call to action to stand for human rights everywhere. When we see the genocide in Myanmar, we don't ask the Rohingya people to demonstrate. We have to do something to stop the genocide. It's the same in Palestine. We cannot only ask the Palestinians. Of course, there are enough Palestinians to make great marches. It's up to us to join them as well. Yes.
This isn't a political question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. You went through a tremendous journey, full of risks and full of hardships. How did your family react to that? I'm just thinking of one of my own sons doing the same thing.
So my mother didn't really know too much about Palestine. She still doesn't know a lot. She knows a little bit now because I've been talking to her quite a lot. So it took some explaining as to why this was important. She just saw this long, dangerous journey and said, like, don't do a dangerous journey because that's dangerous. But after some explanation of why this is very important to do and why we need to do our utmost to stand for justice and human rights everywhere, of course she came around. She was very worried the entire time, but also proud and worried. She still is. I'm still traveling and doing all of this.
Well, a wonderful son and a very brave mother.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your courage to do this. Anyway, I wanted to know, how did your walking project get covered in the press in different countries? If at all it got covered, including in Israel and in different countries along your travel?
Yeah, it got covered quite a lot, and I worked hard towards that end as well. I had 15 minutes of prime time on Croatian national TV. I was on Bulgarian national TV. I was in some press in Austria, not so much in Germany. In Turkey, it was everywhere. All the news channels, TVs and outlets. I did a lot of media in Turkey. Jordan and Lebanon as well. Of course, Palestinian media quite a lot. I think Al Jazeera was the biggest outlet I made it into, and BBC Arabic. This country, zero, because this country is not interested in what's happening in Palestine, unfortunately. And the Jerusalem Post regarding Israel did an interview, got hundreds of nasty comments calling for all sorts of nasty things to happen to me. You can imagine when they read about my story and what I say, they don't like it too much.
This has been one of the most moving presentations I've heard here at the Palestine Center, and I really appreciate your coming here. I don't know where you find all these wonderful speakers and actors in trying to improve the world. But I'm an American Jew, and I see this story and know how to find it in many places in the United States. There are many websites, Mondo, Weiss, and Electronic Intifada, and I am troubled by the fact that American Jews have not really come to terms with the contradiction of the culture we're proud of and the reality that you are revealing to us through your personal experience. And I'm wondering if this problem is going to be solved the way you suggested through the demands for change, or whether it's going to be solved by people beginning to identify with the victims of this injustice. And I'm wondering what strategies there are to help us understand how we are all victims of this injustice, because Israel was not always as insensitive to peace as they are now. And with all the walking and thinking that you must have done on this trip, I'm wondering if you have any insights into how to get beyond the outrage that we feel in looking at this story, to identify more clearly with why this is happening, why we're allowing it to happen, and what changes need to take place at a structural level that will make this change more realistic. It's not a coincidence that you're from Sweden. I think of other Swedes who have exposed racism in the United States, for example, in the 40s. What is the couple's name that? Myrdal. Yeah, the Myrdal, Gunnar Myrdal and his wife. And we think of Sweden as a country where solidarity is appreciated and cherished. And I'm wondering how that lesson gets heard, especially in the United States, which is probably more violent than any country at all. And yet we, in America, don't view ourselves this way. I see what you're doing, and I really wish you the best in doing it. But I'm also frustrated that there is not more awareness on the part of Americans in general that we are contributing to this. And I'm not sure this strategy that you are laying out, that may have worked in Hong Kong temporarily, is sufficient to achieve the goals that I think we all have.
There was quite a few questions. Essentially, no solidarity movement in the world has freed a country. Countries and oppressed people, they free themselves. But solidarity movements facilitate that. They help them to do so. And it's very difficult when the support of one of the world's superpowers is so unconditionally on the oppressing side. So I think the role for the solidarity movement is to stop the protection of the occupation. I think the BDS movement is incredibly powerful, and I think the economic support to Israel from the United States, of course, needs to be, like, to begin with, conditional on not having any human rights violations and occupation. And then the diplomatic support and the UN vetoes should also be conditional, or just revoked whatsoever. But that won't happen unless you have pressure. And this was one example of how to mount pressure. There are many ways. But it starts with education and awareness, because you won't have people demanding and mounting pressure if they don't care. You won't have people that care if they don't know. And Israel is working very hard through their different lobby institutions, AIPAC and others, to influence your politicians to make sure that their support will continue. And there's a very good documentary, I can recommend it to you, called The Lobby. Al Jazeera recently leaked it. They didn't officially release it, they leaked it. They sent an undercover agent into the Israeli lobby, pretending to be an Israeli grassroots activist, secretly filming the conversations And it's very interesting how they openly talk about, if they don't like a headline in the Washington Post, they'll call the editorial team, have it changed. They talk about how much money it takes to buy one of your Congress people, and they have that money. And this is a big problem. But it starts with change, and that's why they react a lot. Netanyahu made a new program investing $72 million in countering the BDS. You don't invest $72 million if you don't perceive it as a threat. So with the South Africa model and the BDS, well, it facilitated the liberation of South Africa, but it was fine. Like ultimately, the people in South Africa that liberated the country. Obviously, it wasn't the BDS from the outside world, but it certainly helped, and that's what we can do from here. Because we're not in Palestine, we're in the United States right now, and since this is a very important actor, you should focus on this country, and this is where you have power also, because you're citizens of this country. So that's what you can do on an individual level, I believe.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Thank you very much. I have three interrelated questions. The first is, you traveled through a number of European countries, speaking different languages and so on. What was generally the language of communication with these police officers and others, for example? Secondly, I'm interested in the reaction of people in these various countries, people who might have been aware of the Palestinian flag or of your mission and so on, hostility or support and so on. And thirdly, I think you said you'd been to 14 US states?
18.
18. Could you say a little bit about your interaction with the media, if any? Did you seek interviews? Did you go on the radio? This type of thing.
Yeah, so your first question, it was English or Google Translate to their language. Or Google Translate, English or Google Translate, because my Swedish doesn't take me very far outside of Sweden. I do speak some Japanese because I lived in Tokyo for a year. That doesn't bring me very far in the European countries either. And that's the languages I know. So, and the interactions were always different. In Germany, it was election time, and the AfD party, the Alternative for Deutschland, Alternative for Germany, the neo-fascists, they were on the rise a lot. They had their election posters everywhere, so people were they didn't enjoy seeing a foreign flag too much. I can put it like that. I got some not nice interactions from a lot of people there, unfortunately, and some great ones. In particular, a Jewish family which invited me to stay at their house for a night because they recognized the flag. And the man told me the most interesting story. They were driving through the West Bank, him and his wife. This was a long time ago, maybe the 80s or earlier. And they got lost, and they end up in a Palestinian village. And the people recognize their license plates. They see they're Israelis. They start throwing stones at them. They panic. They drive away very fast, and they meet some soldiers outside the village, and they tell them this story. And the soldier takes off his big machine gun. He holds his machine gun to the man and asks him if he want to go back. Very interesting story. And I was in the Czech Republic, and Zeman, their president, just went to Israel and said, "We know that the Czech Republic is the greatest friend of Israel in Europe, but why not the entire world?" And he's trying to move the embassy. And then he said, "I'm not a dictator, unfortunately, so I can't do that at the moment." That's the Czech Republic. Different interactions, different countries, different levels of awareness, of course, with the people I meet. And I don't meet a representative group of a population anyway. I meet people on the street. It's a few interactions. Turkey, overwhelming support for Palestine, the most solidary country I've been to so far. And you had a third question.
Interactions with the media in the various states that you visited.
So I've been focusing on trying to, like this speaking tour I'm on right now, it's not like I was invited. When I went home, I went to Google, and I Googled Palestine and the US and all the organizations I could find, all the email addresses. I sent maybe 1,000 emails, and I organized this by myself. So I've done around 40 talks now, so that's 40 organizers that have had to book flight tickets with and fix a place to sleep. So I've been quite busy organizing all of this. I haven't had the energy to pursue any media myself. And it's not like they contact me. Oh no, zero.
Benjamin, thank you so much for your presentation. It's a pleasure for us to have you here, so thank you so much, and thanks for everything you do for Palestine.
Of course.
Thank you.